Hello and welcome back to Campo Largo. We will be continuing where we left off, which, if you recall, is after Elder Hartley and Elder Suarez finally make it to their. I forgot what the word was, but basically their apartment. Um, and yeah, they're about to start their. I actually don't know how long their thing is supposed to last, but I think it's like 6 months or like a little while. The visual novel itself is going to just take place in the month of January. So yeah, they're there to basically reopen, quote unquote, reopen the section in order to have them, I guess, convert the people that live there or something like that. And that is primarily their job. There is already a established Mormon community there, but it's their job to, I guess, help it expand and for lack of a better word, take over the area. Um so yeah, they're about to start that. They're there. Elder Suarez seems to be very reserved, very like just keeping to himself, which is not exactly driving Elder Hartley um crazy, but he's more like, why is this guy so quiet? Um and you could see that through the awkward interactions that he's had so far with them. Well, maybe not awkward, just sort of like he doesn't really know how to get the guy to open up. Um but yeah. Also, fun little fact, which I should probably be saving for the end of this video, but like whatever. When these two are going to be living with each other for like the remainder of their whole assignment, but they're always going to have to be with each other because that's sort of what they do. So every single time you see two of them, that's because that's how they were assigned and that's how they're supposed to be. So yeah, they're going to be with each other for pretty much the remainder of their assignment. So yeah, hopefully it goes well for Elder Hartley, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, without further ado, let us continue. January 4th, 2008, Friday. After mind-muddled hours of unpacking, dinner bought at a small restaurant off the main plaza, no chipa sadly, and a full night's sleep, the next day we have to do some morning exploration for a specific purpose: food. Turns out that there is basically only one store out here with a fresh produce. All other groceries that we see are barely glorified kiosks, carrying snacks and staples. There is a small Chinese-owned grocery, like the one in Puerto Mocavi, but also like that one, its produce is sparse and wilted. Any herbivore's diet in Paraná isn't the most appetizing. In addition to ubiquitous and bland provender, they seem to subside entirely on a diet of noodles, rice, tomato sauce, and sometimes potatoes or a tomato and onion salad. Plus soy. A lot of soy. Elder Suarez doesn't have that problem. He just heads over to the carniceria section to load up on meat. I fill up my basket with a couple of mealy apples, oranges, tomatoes, onion, and more. Some eggs and milk. I serendipitously nestle a certain box into the bottom of the basket so it can't be seen. We meet up again at the checkout line. When Elder Suarez hands over his mission-issued debit card, though, it gets declined. His Guido deposit probably hasn't been processed yet. I slide my card across and tell the cashier to use it. Your allowance hasn't arrived yet, looks like. Elder Suarez nods. I'll pay you back when it does, then. No need, I'll cover this. First, there's literally no need. I always have Giro money left over at the end of the month. What's more, I'm uninterested in tallying and collecting debts. I've seen missionaries do that down to the cents. Too much bother. Thank you, Elder. As I check out, I make sure to have the clerk scan the hidden box while Elder Suarez isn't looking and slide it into a bag where it can't be seen. Back at the bench, I wait until Elder Suarez has gone to take his siesta before I take out a bowl and the mystery box. I whip some milk and an egg into the powder before I remember we don't have an oven. Oh. Oh well, let's try something. I pour it into a frying pan, which I then set over a low flame and cover with a ceramic plate. When Elder Suarez emerges from companionship study, I reveal my handiwork to him with a self-conscious flourish. Welcome to Camp Largo, Elder. It's supposed to be a cake. It's not a cake. It's a little soupy on top and probably burnt on the bottom. Elder Suarez raises an eyebrow and quirks at the corners of his mouth. You didn't mention that you were a master chef. I returned the comment with a mock proud grin. You know, the batter bit actually ends up tasting pretty good. The pan will need to soak for days though. January 5th, 2008, Saturday. I'm in the middle of personal study, doing my reading through one of the New Testament epistles, when the phone rings. I answer, but it's not a voice that I recognize. She introduces herself as Hermana Alvarado, a member of the Campo Largo branch, and said that she tried to contact Presidente Vargas. He was unavailable and recommended that she reach out to us with a request. We're some of the handful of active Melchizedek priesthood holders in town, after all. I ask her how we can help. She explains that her uncle passed away and that they need someone to dedicate his grave today. I would look at my agenda for the morning, but I already know that there are no fixed appointments. We won't need to shift anything around. I say that we'll be there. An arrow pointed off our map indicates that the municipal cemetery is about a kilometer outside of town, on the main street. Halfway through the town, the pavement stops, giving way to packed baked dirt, beige in contrast to the deeper brown of the alluvial soil in Conquista. It's bright in the midday sun. I've begun to figure out that the dust kicked up by the pedestrian paws and vehicle wheels is the same dust that infiltrates every crack and cranny and collects on every possible flat surface. In fact, we're also 2 blocks from the existing town proper. A tanker truck rumbles by, spraying water across the road. Water trucks are one of the only ways that the town have of managing the dust in the summer, although I do slightly begrudge getting mud on my hooves. The edge of town is surprisingly starkly decorated. On one side of the street are houses, on the other fields stretching out towards a flat distance to meet distant clumps of trees. It isn't long, either, until we leave behind the final house, Campo flanking both sides of the dusty path, heading northwest. The cemetery has a walled fence facing the road. Hermana Alvarado, a canine of distinct exaggeration, greets us at the gate, thanking us for coming, and leads us in. A cacophony of birds in the trees above welcomes us. The cemetery itself appears to be rows and rows of above-ground tombs. She leads us between them to a place where about 6 people wait, gathered around a newly fashioned concrete box where, apparently, the remains of the deceased have been deposited. I look around at the faces of the people in attendance. I've seen none of them before. I know no names besides Hermana Alvarado's, and from the plaque on the tomb, the name of her uncle. Yet they all look towards me and Elder Suarez expectant. Several were evidently crying just a few minutes ago. I realize now that we forgot to discuss who would give the dictatory prayer. That was stupid. My mind races calculating. I notice that there's a sentimental register of Spanish that almost everyone seems to be able to employ when emotions are effusive. It's an order of magnitude more poetic than normal speech. Thinking about it, it's as if everyone back in the States had the ability to lapse into sounding like a letter from the Civil War documentary at the drop of a hat. And there's no way that I can mimic it. Hoping that he can, I look up to Elder Suarez, the question in my eyes. He seems to detect the question and replies with a slight nod. Phew. The pressure off, I watch as Elder Suarez pulls out the missionary handbook and flips to the final pages where it gives the instructions for the dedication of a grave. The gaze of the small crowd settles on him, the more intense because of the group's smallness and proximity. One by one, they turn their eyes downward, ready for what Elder Suarez might say. Heavenly Father, By the authority of the holy Melchizedek priesthood, which I hold, I dedicate and consecrate this tomb as a resting place for the body of Eusebio Otero, and ask that it be kept protected and untainted by hands unhallowed or unclean until we shall be called forth at the sound of the trumpet at the dawn of the first resurrection. I pray that thou might send thy true comforter to console those who are at his tomb, shed their tears of loss and separation, to reassure their wounded hearts that this grief shall last but a small moment, and to point their eyes towards that bright coming morn, wherein they shall see die in the flesh and once more be able to embrace their beloved now laid to rest. In the name of thy beloved Son, who shed his blood so that we may all live again, perfected and incorruptible, even Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. I open my eyes and look around. At least one attendee is wiping away a tear. Another approaches Elder Suarez, taking one of his hands in both of hers, and standing at paw tip to give him the customary besos kisses on either side of his snout. We're really not supposed to use the besos as a greeting, but now's not the time to explain a rule. I get the feeling that Elder Suarez just dedicated the grave of her husband. Hermana Alvarado approaches and thanks us for taking the time to help. I reply that we are here to be of service. Before she goes, she promises to have us over for lunch when she gets a chance, a gesture of generosity that I couldn't have foreseen. I nod and accept. The funeral party moves away, leaving me and my companion at the grave. We stand there for a moment in silence. Thanks, Elder, for being willing to do that. It was an honor. I've never had the opportunity before. You did a very good job. And the least that I could offer, really, to brothers and sisters in distress. I ponder the name and the dates on the stone for a moment more. Well, to lunch? I nod and we weave our way back through the tombs to the exit. January 6, 2008, Sunday. Church is at 9 on Sunday. Back in the 80s, the church created the 3-hour Sunday block, sacrament meetings, Sunday school, and concurrent priesthood for the men, and a relief society for the women, meetings each an hour. While it made church easier for Americans, over 6 months that I've come to the conclusion that it is impossible to adapt to panadero customs. Very few people are up that early on a Sunday, but our block can't start later in the morning because that cuts into lunch. All other churches either have their 1-hour mass or worship later, often even in the evenings. But the latest LSD block that I've ever seen in the States, uniquely late, was 3 to 6 p.m. And if we waited until after the siesta to begin, we'd already be ending at 2000 hours. So we're stuck with Sunday at 9. We just need to find the paraneros, however few willing to adapt their schedules. The meeting house near in Campo Largo is a rented building whose Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints sign from its style dates back to the early 90s. Its exterior is painted a solid beige. Its windows, like all windows here, are barred. A great location, though, facing the main plaza, half a block from the terminal and around the corner from the Catholic parish on the one side and town hall on the other. A young otter, torso long for his short frame, stands beside the open door as we approach. He breaks into a big smile and reaches out to shake our hands once he sees us. Endres, it's great to see you. I'm Presidente Wilson Vargas. Welcome to Campo Largo branch. We introduce ourselves. Un placer, un placer. Do you mind introducing yourselves to the whole branch by sharing your testimonies? That had been my plan, so I returned his smile. Of course. As it's the first Sunday of the month, today's sacrament meeting is fast and testimony meeting. Everyone's refraining from food and drink, and anyone can go to the pulpit to share a testimony. One's testimony is the divine assurance of truth. Bearing one's testimony is to state the principles of said truth and to share events that have affirmed them. Even on normal Sundays, Talks and lessons often conclude with the speaker sharing a brief testimony. We go in, the chapel is mostly a bare room. The walls painted the same beige as the exterior. On the side wall is an amateur reproduction of Dale Parsons' famous red-robed Jesus painting, this one with uncannily blue eyes and the leonine face. There are no pews, folding chairs populate the space, a laminated wood pulpit stands in front center, while a table sits off to the side for the preparation and administration of the sacrament. There's no piano. Some chapels have them, but few people here can play one. I can't. My fingers aren't suited for it. Honestly, it's cute in its way. Irregularity in floor plan and maintenance lends it to a certain character that Barrio Uno lacks. As we take our seats, Presidente Vargas approaches us again. Eldres, our Aaronic priesthood holders won't be able to make it today, either. Would you be able to bless and pass a sacrament? Sure. We set down our bags on the chairs and take our spots behind and in front of the sacrament table. I'll bless and Elder Suarez will pass. I'm pondering my testimony throughout the opening hymn, greeting, sacrament hun, and the passing of the bread and water to the 24 present. Testimonies are most often improvised, but I'd like to structure mine. That way I can be sure to say what I want to say. Plus, it can be fun to string together a couple of related scriptures about a theme, turn a testimony into a mini-talk, hopefully if I can manage it, with some wordplay and personal symbolism in there. I smile, remembering how in Puerto Mocavi I once gave an entire talk about bread. It's handy to have a couple of prepared talks in your pocket too. I've heard of branches small enough that the missionaries are assigned, sometimes without notice, to speak every other week. And that's in addition to teaching one or both of the classes. That would be a drag. Of course, I think that's every week for the people who live here. No wonder some folks burn out. When Presidente Vargas opens the meeting, I decide that I'll show my initiative and go first. I get up and proceed to the stand. I give my name, where I'm from, and where I last served, and then I whip out the jokes that I've used for every major self-introduction so far. As you can see, I'm a siervo de Dios. About half of the attendings chuckle and the others smile. I return the expression, desired effect achieved. You see, siervo de Dios means servant of God. Meanwhile, siervo de Dios, pronounced identically, means dear of God. Now that I've shared it, I know I'll hear the joke endlessly, but I suppose that it's endearing. It's like Presidente calling himself 2 metros y pico. Figuratively, that's a little over 2 meters tall. Literally though, 2 meters and a beak. I love that quip. The rest of the testimony goes well, I think. But Elder Suarez's right after mine goes even better. In the same style as his grave dedication, he is able to wield the language in a way that I still can't. It's impressive, though a touch florid. Plus, he shares his conversion story, something that I cannot do. After that, about a quarter of the congregation rises in sequence to bear their testimonies. They range from simple restatements of truth, propositions, to a wandering story about a mango becoming a symbol of God's loving kindness. Presidente Vargas rises to end the meeting and invites everyone in the congregation to sign up to host us for a lunch appointment, announcing that a sign-up calendar is hanging in the other room. He promises that our presence will bless their homes and families. I nod and smile, trying to embody such a lofty prediction for the eyes that have turned towards us. Nothing of note occurs in either class, really. In one, the teacher basically reads the lesson manual. In the other, we read and discuss a recent general conference talk. After priesthood class ends, there were 4 of us, including one who barely said a word. Presidente Vargas asks if we could stay to help him with counting tithings. He has a number of unopened envelopes waiting. We agree. Together we fit into his office and open the offerings. Nothing too great. 20 pesos, 50 pesos, 5 pesos, and 40 centavos. One by one, we plug them into the church's computer program and transmit the totals to Ensign City. We then bundle up the cash for deposit at the local bank. Before we leave, there is another thing that I'd like, a list of branch members so that we can start visiting people. After some fiddling with the directory program, Presidente Vargas manages to print off the list. 267 members, it looks like. Only 27 in church today, though. We got work to do. Working with less active members can be great, though. Not only might we know interested people, sometimes their own unbaptized kids, but if they come back, church becomes more lively and appealing. In the meantime, there's one thing Presidente Vargas wants. He invites us to lunch with his family each Thursday. Now that is something that we eagerly accept. January 7th, 2008, Monday. 6:30. Get up. The alarm beeps. I yawn, roll over, hit the alarm, roll out of bed for companionship prayer. Elder Suarez is up immediately, kneeling by his bedside before even I can make it. It's his turn, and he prays for each of the people that we've met so far who seem to have promise. He prays for the members that we've met individually. He asks Heavenly Father to prepare people for us today and to guide us to those that he has prepared. I cannot quite determine whether I think his specificity is heartwarming or overkill. I don't think that I have the wherewithal to run through so many names each time. No matter, we switch to personal prayers. I pray to feel the Spirit as I go about my duties today, studies, teachings, leadings. I pray that Elder Suarez will continue to do well and feel divine validation for his work. I stand up before Elder Suarez does, heading for the bathroom. Our bench is small, only 3 rooms and a patio. The patio farthest back and accessible via our bedroom's back door is surrounded by 7-foot brick walls and paved concrete. Next to it is our bedroom, 2 twin beds across from each other, 2 floor fans, and a plywood wardrobe. There is a small window that we can open for circulation. And for dust. Always for dust. In the front, facing the street, we have our kitchen and study room. There is an older fridge there that the Arambura elders scrounged up, surmounted by a water dispenser. We've been warned against drinking the tap water. There is a sink with cabinets above and below, as well as a trusty, though dented, gas hot plate. There is a window facing the street, glass panels and shutters that we can open from the inside, with bars on the outside. Below the window is our desk/dinner table, with a standard issued LSD folding table for sitting. In the middle is the bathroom. Nothing special. A sink, a mirror-fronted medicine cabinet, a toilet, a bidet, which I'm nervous to use, and a shower area. Everything is tiled. Carpet is rare in Paraneros houses, I found. I flick on the bathroom light and begin filling up the calphon. There is no warm water running here, and we don't have one of those shower heads that electrifies the water running through it to heat it up. Instead, we have a calphon, a bucket attached high up on the wall with a valve shower head. You fill up the bucket and plug it in so that it can heat up the water. That takes about 10 minutes. Then you release the valve and have about 10 minutes of water for your shower. After I plug in the calphon, I make my way to the front room, where I lay a blanket on the ground for some quick exercises. Retrieving my ePod and speaker, I cue up some music. Plus, not having anything else to focus on lets me actually parse the lyrics, ones that I've heard since childhood. Once upon a time, there was a heaven and earth. That's how it all began. After 10 minutes have passed, I fold up the blanket, stow it atop the shelves, and return to the bathroom. During the shower, I have to avoid tangling my antlers on the shower head. In Puerto Mogavi, one careless turn of my head snagged and broke it. It wasn't fun having to warm up water on our gas stove and sponge bath myself until we could replace the calphon. Done washing myself, I close the valve, fill up the calphon, and start heating it up for Elder Suarez as I dry off. It was good, it was good. It was very, very good. When things began to be... Still, it wasn't quite. Absolutely right. 'Cause there was no you or me. I've got the songs stuck in my head now. They're too catchy. Then we swap places. Elder Suarez from breakfast, which he, as a snake, apparently rarely eats, into the shower, and I from the shower to getting dressed and then breakfast. My standby, a breakfast cereal for grazers, which Elder Brooks said it looked like little twigs, topped with drinkable yogurt and a chopped up piece of fruit. I've got to get my roughage somehow. 8 a.m. Personal study. Elder Suarez dons his shirt and slacks in the bedroom and comes to join me at the desk. It's not built for 2 people, but we have to make do. The bench isn't big enough for anything larger. We're dedicating a portion of our companionship study time to reviewing Preach My Gospel, as Elder Suarez only had 3 weeks of study in the missionary training center before coming here. I like to review the relevant section personally before we review it together. Today we'll definitely review Lesson 1, the Restoration, but I'd like to get into some of the more technical chapters of the manual too. I scanned the table of contents, the Spirit, the Book of Mormon, no need to learn the mission language, perhaps using time wisely, finding people, helping people make and keep commitments. I think back to what I probably should have known earlier, the ways my trainee trained me, poorly. For one, he taught me comprehensively. If it was in Preach My Gospel, he said it, and sometimes extra stuff. Lessons regularly approached an hour, and I grew acutely aware of the investigator's eyes going glassy. So with Elder Brooks, we resolved to do better. We boiled down each principle into 3 lines. It forced us to cut to the chase, speak clearly, and leave room for conversation and questions. Generally, it seemed to work. I also remember how one week Elder Brooks had been sick and we'd been obligated to stay in the bench. During that time, I read all the church magazines and manuals left behind in the bench. There was a great article about how to productively ask questions. Improving our teaching skills it is, then. I reviewed the chapter and the articles before moving on to my reading of the New Testament, which I am currently trying to read through in Spanish. You came from the land where all is light, to a world half day and half night. Okay, after that interruption, back to the Bible. I'm used to the oddness of the King James Version, and I'm somewhat able to piece its antiquated language to extract its meaning, but the Spanish Reina Valeria version the church uses is modern from 1960. It's so much more comprehensible, sometimes frustratingly so, I'll admit. Some common interpretations in the States are only made possible by misunderstanding the language of the King James Version. I try to push back on those where I can, luckily very few of them theologically integral. In any case, next up is the Epistle of the Hebrews. I make it through a couple of chapters before a passage arrests me. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who, in every respect, has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. I return to a line. We have a high priest who in every respect has been tempted as we are. Jesus in every respect has been tempted as we are. That's curious. By strict logic alone, my mind devises at least one clear implication. Jesus must have been attracted to the same sex. Unbidden and somewhat perplexingly, I can feel my heart speed up, my ears spin back, my legs tense, a tangle begins to grow in the pit of my stomach. Elder Suarez is right there, not even a yard away. Did he notice anything? I look over and he's engrossed in his own set of scriptures. No, he didn't see anything. A wonderful story, a sadness and glory. It's written by Jesus and me. I look back to the page, my eyes lingering. I underline the 3 verses. And I double underline the 1 phrase. I sit for a moment, staring. The tangle, ignored, begins to unwind. I make a mental note. I'll have to bring this up if folks start bad-mouthing people with same-sex attraction. And then, utterly uncalled for and tonally discordant, the music barges back in. Some dreams must wait. Life isn't long enough. Some dreams must wait to come true. I'm going to have this album running through my head all day, aren't I? 9 a.m. Leave the bench. After we both wrap up our personal study with prayer, I turn to Elder Suarez. Ready? Easy. We pack up our scriptures into our bags. I grab an extra book of Mormon and a couple of pamphlets. With a deep breath, I insert the key to unlock the deadbolt and open the door. Morning light streams in. 12:30, lunch. I insert the key and unlock the deadbolt, grateful to exit the sunlight, finally. I wish that I had a straw hat. We're allowed to wear those. Sunglasses convince people even more than our white shirts and dark slacks that we're CIA, and are thus forbidden, but I haven't been able to find a hat that fits my antlers. Of course, the heat and humidity follows us in, so I slump onto my chair and turn on my desk fan. Elder Suarez goes immediately to the refrigerator and pulls out one of his full cuts of meat. I don't watch as he cooks and downs it. Instead, I wait to make my own lunch by writing in my journal. We have dedicated journaling time, 1330 to 1400 hours. That lots of missionaries use for a midday nap, a proper siesta, but I like taking extra time to journal. The elders' quorum at my college branch gifted me a nice leather-bound volume along with the tie before I left. Knowing how voluminous I tend to chronicle life events, I brought 5 more blank journals, just in case. And I'm glad that I did. There's just so much to write about. I've already filled up 2. Elder Suarez returns to his chair, squeaking the legs across the tile floor as he pulls it out to sit down. I overheard him run the faucet. He must be done with lunch already. I note that he's looking my way. I would be self-conscious about writing in my journal here, but for one, I'm writing in English, and for another, even English speakers have trouble deciphering my minuscule cursive handwriting. That really does look like chicken scratch. You write in that every day, don't you? I straighten up and look over. Yeah. Well, I try to at least. There is a lot to talk about. Do you just record what we do? Well, only the interesting stuff. And not just a log of our activities, but also, well, my patriarchal blessing told me that I should write down my thoughts, bad and good. Before that, I've only heard people write down the good things. I didn't think that we were supposed to write down negative thoughts or emotions. The snake seems to be weighing that. I've heard that, about only writing down uplifting experiences. They say that it will help build others' faiths. Who do you think will read your journals, with all that stuff in them? Well, my patriarchal blessing also told me that what I write will be helpful to, future generations. So I suppose I'm writing for my kids and grandchildren. They'll just get to know all the sides of me. I've kind of come to terms with that. He nods. That's what some of the scriptures are, sure. I'd be lying if I hadn't thought of my journals in that sense from time to time. Priceless relics passed down from parent to child, bearing the foibles and wisdom of a long past dear. It's probably a bit conceited, but there's some hope in it. What I'm doing today will continue to matter, be the pebble that spreads ripples in the pond. Besides, it's nice for me. It helps to process the days, get my thoughts out of my head. It's not often that I get the feelings associated with the spirit, a warmth in my heart, for instance, but I think that I am feeling that now. I'm telling the truth about something important to me. And Elder Suarez is listening. I've never really written in a journal, I'll admit. I never thought anyone would be interested, in addition to the fact that it takes so much time. I try to give a reassuring smile. I'm sure folks would find your thoughts and experiences interesting. And besides, you can write what you want, what you have time for. Find a place that works for you. He nods. Then he points over to where my journal has nearly closed on its own. The inner cover and leaflet page are visible. What are those? Oh, he's noticed my series of tallies. My ears go back as I let out a somewhat embarrassed laugh. Oh, that. Well, I'm keeping track of how long I've had my antlers. So, typically shorter days cause our antlers to fall off, but coming from summer in the northern hemisphere to spring down here, the days haven't gotten short enough for them to fall off yet. Out of curiosity, I have wondered what the overall record has been. I bet there's some globe-trotting minor celebrity elk who grew a huge rack and then spent the rest of his life swapping hemispheres to keep it indefinitely. And there are some who definitely take hormone treatments to forestall losing a big rack. I'm guessing they probably won't shed until June. I passed my record weeks ago. It feels weird. literally unnatural. Without thinking, I've reached up to run a finger along my right antler, tracing it from the base halfway up its curve before I notice and self-consciousness brings my arm down again. I have seen missionaries who got their shed antlers engraved by local artisans, personalized souvenirs. That would be cool. Elder Suarez's eyes are still on me, contemplating my antlers. Do they itch? Oh, no. Just ought to still have them. Like time froze. Ah, well, an overdue skin shed itches. It's not that pleasant. I'm glad that you don't have to deal with that. Yeah, I bet that's really annoying. Anyway, make your lunch, Elder. I'll see if I can figure out what to write about today. Right, yes. As I cook, my mind conjures up a scenario in which I wake up to find Elder Suarez-sized snake skin draped across its bed. I'm sure that he's got discreet ways of disposing of stuff, though. Still, ugh. 1400, Companionship Study. We take our seats at the desk yet again. It's Elder Suarez's turn for the opening prayer, after which we dive into the material. As he's a new missionary, we need to read the entire missionary handbook together throughout the transfer. Avoid slang and inappropriately casual language, even in your apartment with your companion or in letters to your friends. Refer to other missionaries, including your companion, as elder or sister, and their surnames not by their first names, nicknames, or surnames alone. Address members and investigators as brother or sister with their surnames. Not anything that we've been having trouble with. On to the meat of the study hour. I explained my trainer's excessive teaching style as an introduction to the topic that I wanted to review. Elder Suarez appears to be listening intently, but I haven't quite learned to recognize the expressions of his seldom blinking, earless face yet. Of course, that is a terrible idea. How do you know their interest level if you don't let them speak? Oh no, does he think that I am presenting that as a positive example? Yes, precisely. You spend a lot of time just wearing out your welcome. Yes, it's much better to present the basics and let their interest direct the conversation. Okay, he's on board. Already. Great. That'll be easier. Discordantly, a hint of disappointment tugs at me. We move on to the varieties of questions. At least here Elder Suarez doesn't seem to be already in the know. We finish companionship study by practicing teaching the restoration in 3-sentence fragments, and by formulating a couple of questions we can then use to gauge comprehension and promote reflection. 1500 hours, language study. I typically use this time by reading, trying to improve my vocabulary and style. The primary problem is that there is very little approved reading material that's produced by Spanish speakers. Most of the church's materials are translated from English, and they include so many circumlocutions intended to preserve the exact meaning of the original, and they end up being incredibly stilted. Ah well. Elder Suarez, meanwhile, has a little workbook for English from MTC. I've seen it before. It's a cleverly concise explanation of the English language's weird grammar. I offer my assistance and he says that he'll let me know when he's ready for that. We kneel again for prayer as we leave for the evening. 1600 hours, leave the bench. 2100 hours, return home. We're coming off the longest day of the year, so it's still somewhat light out when we return to the bench. I flick on the light, back to the desk, this time for daily planning. After a prayer, giving thanks for the evening and asking for guidance planning the next day, we count up our key indicators for the day and pull out our list of potential people to visit. While we're trying to find new investigators, of course, we're also trying to clean up the membership list, see who is still here, who's still interested in the church, and if they aren't attending, what's keeping them away. We did have one notable success in that department. A mere 2 blocks from the bench, following an address from the directory, we actually met a member who was running her despensa when we stopped by. Mirta Camiletti is a middle-aged armadillo, a tattoo, as they say down here, and she looked happy to see us. Her husband passed away about a decade before, and she has an adult daughter who lives in Aramburo. Her daughter is still on Campo Largo's records, suggesting that she hasn't been to church in Aramburo. They would have to transfer her records. Well, Hermana Mirta said that she hadn't been to church in years for reasons unexplained. She did invite us over to lunch on Thursday. Every Thursday, actually. We didn't start the day with an additional weekly meal appointment as a goal, but it's one that we achieved. We'll just have to eat outside so as to avoid being alone and unobserved with a woman. I know I'm looking forward to learning more about this generous sister. Continuing our meetings, we put down plans and backup plans for each hour of the next day, listing people to visit and the message that we think that we'll share with them. We know 1 or 2 things to review and study to help with the lessons. We fill the day with numerous backup plans. Really, the last thing that we want to do is golpear, clapping. In the States, they call it tracting, going from house to house, knocking doors and ringing doorbells. Here, though, you most often clap in front of the house to get the residents' attention. It's terrifically inefficient, a last resort. We close the planning meeting with another prayer, after which we have another hour to get ready for bed. I add a couple of lines to my journal. I go to the bathroom to wash the sweat cake dust off of my fur, on my arm, hooves, and face, looking up into the mirror as I do so. I look tired, but that's just a sign of a day where I've done my duty. Then I hear the phone ring. I clop out of the front room and look to see who's calling so late. Oh, the zone leaders. I answer. Buenas noches. I recognize who's calling with his first slantily pronounced words. Buenas noches, Elder. We've got a referral for you. Straight to the point, and it's promising. A referral means that they've identified someone for us to contact. I pull out my chair, sit back into it, and open my agenda to potential investigators in preparation. Oh yeah? Yes, name's Juan Gonzalez. He's a jaguar, big jaguar, and he walked right into our chapel here while we were visiting the Family History Center. Seemed nervous at first, but really cool guy. Asked a bunch of questions. The grin is audible. Headed to Campo Largo. Okay, that's all pretty rare. Oh wow, huh? He said that we could visit too? Seemed pretty interested. I trust his judgment enough to permit excitement to ease its snout into my brain. You got an address, right? But of course, Elder. There is a hesitation on the other end before Elder De Silva reads out his notes. Avenida Los Inmigrantes. Well, I haven't seen that name on the map yet, or on any street sign. I'll have to check later. Maybe ask President Vargas at lunch tomorrow. No cross streets, though? Nope. Sorry. Ah, well. We'll just have to ask around. Okay, got it. Awesome. Keep us posted how it goes. Of course. Thanks for passing it along. De nada. Now get some sleep. I laugh, as if I'd voluntarily lose sleep. You too. As I hang up, Elder Suarez pads up from the bedroom. Who's that? I smile. A potentially golden investigator, sounds like. But that will have to wait for another time. As I promised Elder De Silva, by 22:30 hours, both Elder Suarez and I are in our twin beds. I've turned on my fan to combat the stale, warm wetness of the air in the pench. We have our nightly companionship prayer and personal prayer, and then it's lights out until 6:30, when it all begins again. January 8, 2008, Tuesday. Observations after a couple days here. First, unlike in Conquista, where houses were numbered, numbers increasing 100 each block, none of the houses here seem to have numbers. Every address in the member directory is just street name between street name and street name. I have no idea how it's supposed to work. I suppose we just have to ask around when we're looking for someone. I suppose it's equally as awkward as a system used in Conquista's viviendas, government-built housing. In those developments, each house was indicated by a number, block, and parcel. There was no logic to the numbering of the blocks, leading to many frustrating hours wandering around labyrinthian neighborhoods, seeking out a house that was probably turned out to be unlabeled. Bleh. Second, the area book that we got from the office is strange. It forms predate Preach My Gospel, so the teaching records that we've been left are hardly comprehensive, though they do give us a number of names and addresses. There are a couple old statistical reports too, where they tracked a different set of measures. Nowadays we track it investigators with baptismal dates, investigators in sacrament meetings, lessons with and without a member present, referrals received and contacted, and lessons with less active members. Among the statistics they tracked back then was Books of Mormon distributed. That doesn't seem to incentivize a wise use of resources on missionaries' part, though some of our predecessors kept more meticulous records. Notable is someone named Ivan, who unsurprisingly took all of the then-current missionary discussions, plus more visits. There aren't notes about his reactions, but receiving a full set of discussions speaks volumes by itself. He bore with the missionaries as they presented 6 full word-for-word memorized lessons. However, there's no baptismal date recorded, and he's not in the branch directory. What happened there is a mystery I'd love to learn more about. But that'll have to wait for another day because we've got our first lunch appointment. President Vargas is running late, so we sit out in front of the house until he arrives. Hermana Vargas brings us glasses of juice as we wait. He apologizes for his tardiness when he pulls up on his moto, reassuring him that it's no problem. We enter their house, constructed of bare bricks with a corrugated steel roof. The living room/kitchen is mostly unfurnished, save for the table and chairs. A TV sits on a smaller table off to the side. A picture of Asuncion Temple hangs on the wall beside their ceiling certificate framed. The meal is a guiso, a common dish, a sort of soupy casserole of pasta, tomato sauce, and protein. It turns out that Hermana Vargas grew up in Arumbura and Presidente here in Campo Largo, and both of them have served missions, Hermana in La Plata and Presidente in Northern Andea. He was called as branch president very soon after they got married. That was a couple of years back. From the other room comes a cry, and Hermana Vargas walks into the bedroom, returning to the table with her child, whose tiny lutrine teeth come on full display when she yawns. Her small, thick tail wiggles out of the blanket in which she's wrapped. They're a really great couple, it seems. The church needs folks like these folks with energy and experience and hope, as well as plenty of years ahead of them. January 9th, 2008, Wednesday. As we'll be spending P-Day next week in Conquista, we decided to stay in Campo Largo instead of heading to Aramburra. Quiet P-Days can be really nice. No rush to travel out and back, especially when bus schedules might not align with our daily schedule. No need to load groceries back on a bus. Even time to take a real siesta, if we like. But also, we need to wash all of our laundry by hand in the concrete sink out back, hanging it to dry on the clothesline across our patio. I dump some powder detergent into the basin and open the tap, filling it with cold water that begins to sud up as it fills. Pants are pretty easy. Just scrub them against the ribbed, angled front side of the sink made for exactly this purpose. The shirts, all white, are a little more difficult. The strap from my scripture bag rubs against my shoulder all day, capturing and grinding into dust. After a day or two, the shoulder in question is brown. I've heard that over in San Ignacio province, the dirt is so red that missionary shirts take an indelible orange hue. Thankfully, the brown comes out from after some scrubbing with a brush. The garments aren't that bad either. They're just white after all. I always felt slightly uncomfortable that in Puerto Mocavi, we had a rotation of local members who would handle our laundry. Some of them I know had The little barrel-shaped washing machines that were the most common variety around here. Others did it by hand, like we have to do now. At that time, I thought keeping track of the logistics as well as dropping off and retrieving the laundry was a hassle. Now I see why the system exists. Altogether, laundry takes a good long while. If we did this every week, we wouldn't have time for much less, particularly since only one of us can use a sink at a time. And the missionaries often compensate the members, though some decline remuneration. Maybe after we meet the local members, one of them will be up for washing our clothes as a side gig. If she's gotten her temple endowment, that would be really helpful, otherwise we'll be washing our garments. That wouldn't be so bad, I suppose. I finish wringing out my last garment bottom and hang it on the line. Hey, Elder Suarez, sink's open. The snake emerges from our bedroom onto the porch, his laundry bundled into his arms. We trade places and he dunks the whole load into the sink. An odd curiosity sparks in my mind as I watch him shovel the clothes under the water, sprinkling more detergent on top as he does so. I step back into the bench, glad to re-enter the shade. I'm just about to turn the bathroom's faucet handle to rinse any remaining detergent off of my hands when curiosity pricks my thoughts. Insatiable, I retrace my steps back onto the patio and start speaking as I open the door. Hey, Elder? Question. Elder Suarez looks up at me from his unexpected new position, lying on the patio's concrete, his pants and garments, tops and arms up, and hands behind his head. Yes? My mind draws a blank. He perceives my hesitation while I struggle to recall my question. I was gonna bask while my clothes soaked. You had a question, though? It's only now that I notice that, yes, his clothes are in the sink, yes, he's fully in the sun, and yes, it would make sense that he'd enjoy it more than I would. I realize, with a hint of dread, that my question is dreadfully silly, perhaps even stupid. I hope. I hope. It's not insensitive. I show a suds-soaked hand. Well, mammals' palms get kind of wrinkly when they're in the water too long. Does that, happen for reptiles? He pulls a hand from behind his head, looking at the palm and then showing me his lighter scuts. Nope, nothing of the sort. Doesn't seem to have been offensive, but I still feel a rush of blood to my ears and face. Just, curious. Thanks. Enjoy. I buck back into the bench and smack my face with a hand. That wasn't a very senior companion-style question, and, to boot, to my embarrassment, it was really awkward to stare like that. Later I find myself at the desk, writing in my journal, when Elder Suarez comes to join me, pulling out his chair. Before he manages to open his copy of Jesus the Christ, I decide to try to redeem my earlier awkward question with the one that I'd shelved when he told me his story on the bus. Elder, I was curious about something. He looks my way. Oh, yes? I can justify this sort of miscellaneous conversation to myself because it's P-Day. It's the day for things that would be distractions elsewhere. You'd mentioned that the person who introduced you to the church at school. You said, her? Is she someone that you're writing? He withdraws his fingers from between the pages of Jesus Christ and reaches for his scripture bag. Out of his triple combination, he takes out a 3x5 photograph and hands it over. There is a pre-Elder Suarez wearing a graphic tee of some sort. He's sitting behind a table spread with half-eaten meals on paper plates. The cream brickwork and tall, narrow-barreled windows in the background suggest that it's a church building. His arms wrap around the shoulders of another snake, equally slender, but with a greener hue and stripes running down from her eyes to where the graceful neck plunges into her shirt's collar. Both are wearing smiles that aren't only serpentine broad, but also wide open and asymmetrical in that way that conveys emotional authenticity. They're having fun, whatever this event is. That's a way to answer my question. Her name is Yamila. Instead of waiting for me, she decided to serve a mission of her own. She's going to Central America and will be reporting to the missionary training center in about 2 months. That's one way to manage a long-term relationship as a missionary, And one benefit of Elder Suarez being older, if they'd both been 19, she'd have to wait until she was 21 to leave on her mission. I bet she's lovely. I hand back the photo and he carefully stashes it inside the book. She is, Elder. That's neat that you're able to serve at the same time too. Nice wedding around. My grandparents got engaged just before my grandfather left on his mission, but they were high school sweethearts from a small town. That's impressive in its own respect. I nod and shrug simultaneously. Definitely. Granted, it was a different time. That's how the 50s were, at least in the United States. I can't really imagine getting engaged before a mission. I get a curious turn of the head from Elder Suarez. So, do you have a doe waiting back home for you? I foresaw this question before I raised the topic. I rehearsed a response. I wave a hand, deftly conveying my equanimity. Nah. He accepts my laconic reply with a nod. I plan to figure all that out after the mission. It would have been unusual for me to find someone before. You thought you did find that someone, though. I retort, obviously not. Back to the conversation. My parents met at college shortly after my father's mission and got married a year later, so it's eminently possible. That certainly makes sense. I chuckle, remembering a factoid. You know, I was born when they were at college. Not only did I attend college classes as a baby, but I was blessed in a singles ward. My father was a member of the bishopric? Am I rambling? I'm not exactly sure why I'm offering these seemingly unrelated details. Trying to make conversation with someone who's continually reserved, trying to offer smidgens of Mormon life for someone who's relatively new to it, a glimpse into the weird world of desert Mormonism, a peculiar brand of boasting. It will be interesting to be a father. Think about it a lot? Periodically, I'm doing what I can to prepare myself. That's one reason I decided to serve a mission. They called me to the Elders' Quorum presidency and I felt unready. I needed more experience. And if I needed more experience to help people at church, how much more experience do I need to guide spirits entrusted to my care? The mission is sometimes billed as preparation for the rest of life, church service, marriage, career, leadership in general. But I haven't considered making such preparations an explicit personal goal before, often the opposite. Actually, I don't want to practice salesmanship on the mission or after, so I focus on listening and teaching. But I have thought a little about fatherhood, that vague future era of full-time workdays, callings, and children's extracurriculars. I've got a list of potential names for kids, I'll confess, and books that I want to read to them. Beyond fantasy novels and sci-fi epics, I've pictured handing over my journals, including today's, to my children. In the vision, I'm on my deathbed surrounded by loved ones, delivering my life to them as a final gift. And thus my journals become some of the books that they read in turn to their children and thus to the remainder of my posterity throughout all generations of time. While bittersweet, perhaps even a little morbid, it's also reaffirming. I can almost hear the orchestral soundtrack playing hymn arrangements behind the montage of intergenerational remembrance. Thinking of time though, I check my watch. We've got about an hour before P-Day is over. I should get to writing. Thanks for sharing, Elder. Sorry for delaying your studies. Oh, de nada. Thank you for asking. Together we crack open our respective books, his tome of theology, my unwritten autobiography. And that's where I'm going to leave it for today. So we got to see the day-to-day life of these two, I guess, what they're going to be doing basically for the next few months, I think. The first thing that we saw is a dedication to, like for the grave, for the person that died. And I didn't know that Mormons did that. I thought that was more like a Catholic and a Christian thing, which was interesting. We also saw like their little church. They're I don't know if it's church because like I'm not a Mormon. I don't really know anything about that. I know they have churches. I know they have places of worship, and I'm assuming this is one of them. And we saw how they, as with other religions, give like their testimony, how they got into the religion, I guess, and whatnot. um, then we saw that they have like their little private study time. And during that time, Elder Hartley, again, the deer, had a bit of a gay panic in a way, where he, I guess during this time you're supposed to like read it and then like see how you interpret the text that you're reading. And then I guess he got to a point where he thought that Jesus might have been gay or might have had like gay thoughts about a companion or something like that. I'm not sure how he got to that, but I feel that that may be something that perhaps Elder Hartley may be inclined to. Wink, wink. Also, the what are they? What are their names? The zone leaders, which I guess are like people that oversee the area, so like supervisors. Called to tell them about a golden referral, somebody that seems to be very interested in the church, and I'm not sure if that's going to be plot relevant. Then them having to going to the current church leaders house and having dinner, because I guess that's something that Mormons are kind of known for, that they're very community orientated. And then having to wash their clothes because they don't have anybody to wash it for them. And then Elder Suarez and Elder Hartley kind of spoke about how they both individually got into the church, where Elder Hartley got into it because it seems to be like a family thing because they're all Mormons, I guess. Whereas Elder Suarez started off as a Catholic who, I guess, seems to be more interested in the whole religious aspect, but more so in like finding out how it works than him being like, oh, the text spoke to me. But I mean, I suppose for most people, like, oh, it's like the teachings and whatever speaks to me, but it's more, he seems to be more interested in how religion works. And you might see a bit more about this in the next part, where they're going to be speaking about some religious texts related to Mormons, but he seems to be more curious about religion rather than invested in religion itself. But yeah. Anywho, so what are your thoughts so far on the visual novel? Is it a little weird to be listening to or reading a religion-oriented visual novel? Is it just weird in general? Is it not something that you thought you would be listening to if you're still listening to this? Write down in the comments. And thank you all for watching / listening. If you would like to play Campo Largo yourself or stay up to date with the visual novel, then you can do so by going down into the link in the description, to which would have a direct link for the itch.io page where you can download and play the game. If you would like to support the project, they do have a Patreon and the Ko-fi, which I will also be linking down in the description. And if you would like to support the channel and support me, then, become a channel member. There will be a link down in the description, but there usually is a link down below the video itself, depending on what platform you're watching this on. And yeah, do it. You get earlier access to the videos as they're being scheduled. I mean, it's not necessary, but it does help. Or you can support through Ko-fi. Support through Ko-fi. And I do have a throne in case you're feeling generous. But yeah, anyway, so I guess that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.